I am delighted you are here. I'm Gina Neff. I'm the director of the Minderoo Center for Technology and Democracy. Welcome to our latest event, Meredith Broussard, Confronting Race, Gender, and Ability Bias in Tech. Now, before we get started, there's just a few housekeeping points here at Jesus College. In case of an alarm sounding, we ask you leave the room via the emergency exit. No test is planned for today. The event will be recorded by Zoom. By attending the event, you are giving your consent to being included in the recording. If you would like captions for this evening's event, they're available through Zoom. If you missed the link on our registration site, the desk in the back, our team are in the room and they're able to give you the link for your device. The recording will be available.
Go out the room and do that one.
No. This is the wonderful thing of making tech work for all. The recording will be available on the Minderoo Center for Technology and Democracy website shortly after the event. Afterwards, when we have our discussion, if you raise your hand, we'll bring a mic to you. We're using room audio for our recording, so we do ask that everyone is amplified with a microphone. A transcript will also be made available online after the event. Now, I'm pleased to start. I am very pleased tonight to be joined by Meredith Broussard. Meredith is an associate professor at New York University. Her books include Artificial Unintelligence: How Computers Misunderstand the World. And she appears in the Emmy-nominated documentary Coded Bias on Netflix. The latest book, More Than a Glitch, Confronting Race, Gender, and Ability Bias in Tech, was released by MIT Press in March of this year. The word glitch implies an incidental error, as easy to patch up as it is to identify. But what if racism, sexism, and ableism aren't just bugs, but they're mostly functional in machinery? What if they're coded into the system itself? In this book, Meredith demonstrates how neutrality in tech is a myth and why algorithms need to be held accountable. And I just want to take a minute to thank Meredith for joining us. One of the things I truly admire about her work and recommend and commend her work to everyone is she takes deep technical knowledge and translates it in a way that makes it incredibly accessible. She is such a rare combination of genius in understanding the inner workings of how our systems are being built and how they are designed. Genius too, and perhaps as importantly, in telling the kinds of stories that people understand and resonate. That's what I think is so powerful about the book she's going to talk about tonight. How she makes concrete through people's lived everyday experience some of these lofty principles that we talk about in AI ethics. She does the work of telling us exactly how they're impacting people's everyday lives. So with no further ado, please join me in welcoming.
Hi, everybody. Gina, thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is great to be here with all of you today at Jesus College. I am going to talk a little bit about some ideas from More Than a Glitch. As Gina said, it came out about 2 months ago. And what happens in the book is I offer a hype-free explanation of AI, what it is and isn't. I give some examples from justice, medicine, education, and more about how discrimination works inside automated systems. And I give some options for change. So the book is not entirely a bummer, right? I like to start with talking about what AI is and isn't. And that, of course, starts with the Terminator, because at some level, many of us are thinking about the Terminator when we think about artificial intelligence, right? When you really examine, like, what is the image in your mind's eye? This is one of the images that features heavily. Also things from Star Wars, Star Trek, any of our favorite Hollywood examples, and these are all terrific. They are wonderfully creative. They inspire us to imagine other worlds, but it's really important to remember that that is imaginary AI. What is real about today's AI, today's artificial intelligence, is just math. It's very complicated, beautiful math. Another way of describing it is computational statistics on steroids, right? So there is no Terminator, there is no R2D2, although I'm a little sad about that. And there is no robot takeover, there is no existential risk that we need to be worried about right now. Instead, what we should focus on is not what's imaginary about AI, but we should focus on what's real. And we should focus on the ways that AI is harming people. We should focus on present harms to real people instead of obsessing over imaginary harms in an imaginary future. So what kinds of harms are we talking about? Well, there are a lot of them. And in order to predict the kinds of harms that people face with automated systems, with AI systems, I think a really good frame is one that's authored by Ruha Benjamin in her book, Race After Technology. And that's the idea that automated systems discriminate by default. Okay, so for a very long time, there's been a perspective that has dominated our cultural discourse, which is something I call techno-chauvinism. And techno-chauvinism is the idea that computational solutions are superior to others, that tech is objective, that technology is neutral or unbiased. And when you let go of that, when you let go of techno-chauvinism, it becomes easier to see how real-world problems are embedded in our data-driven systems. Okay. So let me back up for a sec and explain what is actually going on with the math of today's AI systems. All right, super easy explanation that you can take with you and use in those business meetings that you go into when people are like, oh yeah, we should definitely buy this new AI system, right? So what happens when you build an AI system is it's data driven. You take a whole bunch of data, absolutely as much data as you can get your hands on, ideally for free, but you take as much data as you can get and you feed it into the computer and you say, computer, make me a model. And the computer says, okay, and it makes a model. And the model shows the mathematical patterns in the data. That's it. That's AI, right? So then this model, this AI model, you can use in order to make predictions, in order to make decisions, in order to generate new text or new images or new whatever, right? That's generative AI. That's what you see in things like ChatGPT or Bard or DALL-E or Midjourney, all of the kind of buzzwords that people are talking about nowadays. All it is data, either text or images or video or whatever. Take the data, feed it into the computer makes a model, model shows mathematical patterns. Then you can use that model for new things, right? But let's think about the data. Because the data that we're using to train AI systems is data about the real world. And the real world has a bunch of problems, right? I'm a journalist, I'm a data journalist. I write a lot about the problems of the real world. And those problems include discrimination, racism, sexism, ableism, all kinds of structural inequality. And even if you don't think that these problems are in the data that you're using to train an AI system, even if you think, well, it's just data, I just scraped it from the web, how bad could it be? Well, the computer is so good at finding the mathematical patterns that we see over and over again that automated systems, AI systems, replicate the problems of the past. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of this. It shows up in finance. The Markup, which is a really terrific algorithmic accountability organization in the United States, did an investigation into mortgage approval algorithms, right? So when you are trying to buy a house, you apply for a mortgage. This loan finances about 80% of your purchase usually. And it turns out that the mortgage approval algorithms were denying borrowers of color loans. Nationally, loan applicants of color were 40 to 80% more likely to be denied than their white counterparts. And in some metro areas, this disparity was more than 250%. And a data scientist might look at this and say, hey, well, I don't understand what's going on. It's just data. It's not racist. And the sociologist might look at this and say, oh yeah, it's the data that's racist, right? So what's happening is the system is being fed with data about who has been given loans in the past. Well, in the United States, there's a very long history of financial discrimination against borrowers of color. The US has a lot of residential segregation. There is also a practice, or there was historically a practice called redlining, where people would physically draw a red line around certain neighborhoods and say, all right, people who are not white can live here, and then white people are going to live in all the other places, right? So all of these things are part of, part of the US's frankly shameful history. And these patterns are being picked up on by the machine learning models, by the AI models, right? So historical discrimination being repeated. We also see it in policing. You are probably familiar with some of the problems in facial recognition technology. We know this thanks to a really fantastic paper and project by Julie Bonwini, Tamika Brew, and their team called Gender Shades. The finding from Gender Shades and several other projects was that facial recognition is better at recognizing men than women. It's better at recognizing light skin than dark skin. And when we do an intersectional analysis, we discover that facial recognition is best of all at recognizing men with light skin. It's worst of all at recognizing women with dark skin. And trans and non-binary folks tend to not be recognized by these systems at all. Now, part of this is due to the training data, because when you dig into it, when you look at the training data that was used to make most of the major facial recognition systems, which is one of the things that the team did in this project. Yes, they found that most of the training data was men with light skin, right? And so a data scientist might look at this and say, oh, well, the problem is the training data. Well, what if we just put in more women? What if we just put in a greater range of skin tones? Will it make the facial recognition more accurate? And yes, that is absolutely true. That is a way that you can make the facial recognition systems more accurate. But we need to go a step further and think about justice. Because facial recognition systems, when they are used in policing, are disproportionately weaponized against communities of color, against poor communities, against communities that are vulnerable and are already over-policed and over-surveilled. So a justice-focused solution would be not to use facial recognition in policing at all. Another way we see AI discrimination pop up is in medicine. This is a kidney. And one of the examples that I find particularly horrifying comes from a calculation that was used to calculate when people are eligible for a kidney transplant. Okay, so you qualify for the kidney transplant list when your eGFR score is 20 or below. That means your kidneys have about 20% function. And until 2 years ago, white people and Black people were calculated using different scores. So basically, if you were Black, you got a multiplier in your eGFR score that was kind of hidden in the algorithm used to calculate your eGFR score. And it meant that Black patients qualified for the kidney transplant list later than everybody else. Black patients had to be sicker in order to qualify for a kidney transplant. Now, this doesn't mean that you get a new kidney. This just means you'd be eligible to be on the waiting list, right? Why is this? Well, there was a deeply racist assumption that Black people's bodies work differently than other people's bodies. And we see this a lot. I'm sure if we have historians of science in the room, you're very familiar with the way that race, which is actually a social construct, has been treated as a biological construct sometimes in history, and a lot of problems have resulted from that. The same thing happens when data scientists or AI, computer scientists making AI take the patterns that they see in the medical world at face value and just unthinkingly implement them in automated systems, right? Because there was this racist assumption about how Black bodies work, and then that got uncritically incorporated into this medical technology. Fortunately, due to activism by doctors, by patients, and by interested folks, the kidney calculation in the US was changed 2 years ago, and it resulted in lots and lots of people being eligible now for life-saving medical technology. We see AI discrimination come up in access to public benefits. You're seeing a pattern here, right? Access to public benefits. This is something that's actually not in the book, but you absolutely should check out anyway. It is a new algorithmic accountability investigation from Wired and Lighthouse Reports. And it's about Rotterdam. The city of Rotterdam was using an algorithm in order to detect welfare fraud. And I say that with scare quotes, air quotes, because anytime that somebody is trying to detect fraud in public benefits or detect welfare fraud, what they're actually doing is they're trying to restrict access to public benefits. So what they found was that this algorithm that was used in Rotterdam to try and detect welfare fraud was actually biased based on gender and based on ethnicity. Because mathematically, the factor that was most predictive in the data about whether or not somebody would be a cheater on their benefits was Dutch language ability. Right, so anybody who was, say, a recent immigrant, who, you know, their command of Dutch was not there yet, they were being flagged as potential welfare cheats. Okay. Rotterdam, to their enormous credit, realized that this was a problem, and they said, "All right, we're going to stop using this algorithm," and this is in part why we have access to it. So the journalists at Lighthouse Reports and at Wired managed to get access to the code, the data, the model, and the documentation used to construct this algorithm. This is the first time that we have had access to all of these things, right? So when you make an AI system, when you make a machine learning system, I told you before, you make a model, you use the training data, and then people theoretically write down what happens in the documentation. And if you know how to read code, you can read the code and you can like find where the potential flaws are. And people tend to treat code like it's a big secret. It's not actually a big secret. It shouldn't be a big secret, but people do treat it like it's a big secret. And one of the things that algorithmic accountability reporters do is we go poking around in people's code. Traditionally, one of the functions of the press is to hold power accountable. In a world where algorithms are increasingly being used to make decisions on our behalf, that accountability function has to transfer to algorithms and their creators. So we have algorithmic accountability reporters. Markup is my favorite example of this, but there's also some great stuff happening at the New York Times, at ICIJ, and at Lighthouse Reports. Okay. So what we can do with the tools of algorithmic accountability reporting is we can open up black boxes. We can investigate algorithms, we can evaluate them to find out if they are treating people fairly. And generally what you'll find is that they are not. Generally what you'll find is that algorithms or algorithmic systems are discriminating. Why? Well, training data, bias, problems of the real world reflected in our AI systems. Right? And there are actually mathematical methods we can use to address this bias. Like, it is not the end of the world to find bias, but you have to be willing to just look for it, to admit that it's there, to admit there might be a problem with your automated system. And techno-chauvinism prevents people from wanting to do that. Let's talk a little bit more about techno-chauvinism and how it intersects with accessibility. Because techno-chauvinism gets in the way of making the world truly more accessible. And I want to tell you a story about something that happened to a man named Richard Dan in Maryland. So Richard worked at an Apple store in Maryland, and he was doing great in his job at the Apple store. Richard is deaf. He is fluent in ASL, an American Sign Language, and folks would travel for hours to get to his store to work with him because he could speak with them in ASL. He could speak with them in their own language. And this mattered a lot, especially when you're talking about technology, because it's really difficult to talk about technology in the first place, and talking about all the little fiddly things in a different language is really tough, right? So Richard was a really great resource to the deaf community. And one of the things that Apple provided him with was an iPad with a Notes app installed so that he could type back and forth with customers who were not deaf, which worked really well until it didn't. Sometimes customers would refuse to work with them. Right? And his manager said this was okay. His manager said, oh, well, you know, people have a choice to, people have the right to choose who they want to work with. And this did not feel right. The same manager later on started giving Richard a hard time. He said, Richard, you're not keeping up in the team meetings. And Richard said, well, I am having a hard time keeping up in the team meetings because it's a setup, kind of like we are having today, where there's one person in front of the room and then the rest of the team is down there. And the accommodation that Richard had been offered was that one of his teammates was supposed to sit next to him and type what was happening in the meeting. Now, having a scribe does work really well sometimes. I've had scribes sit in on my classes and it works really well, but it does not work well when it is a coworker, because the coworker needs to pay attention to the meeting too. The coworker also needs to learn, right? So the coworker is not necessarily doing a great job of transcribing and also listening and participating, right? So, and And then they tried speech to text, right, which is a technological accommodation. But the speech to text did not work that well because if you've ever used speech to text, which I'm sure all of you have by now, it does not get everything. And also the acoustics are a problem. So if if you're sitting in the back with a speaker or a microphone that's supposed to pick up on the speech at the front of the room, if there's no projection in the room, then the microphone is going to pick up on the ambient noise as well as the speaker at the front of the room, and it's not going to work exactly the way that you expect, right? And Richard explained this and said, I really need a human interpreter because sometimes you just need a human interpreter. Technology for accessibility has given us, has worked beautifully. It does work beautifully until it doesn't, right? When you hit the outer limits of what the technology can do, and you're still relying on that technology, then it becomes marginalizing. Sometimes we should use a human instead of a computer. It's not a big deal, right? Only techno-chauvinists are very excited about, no, we use technology all the time. And instead, I think we should use the right tool for the task, because sometimes that's a computer, sometimes it's something simple like a book in the hands of a child sitting on a parent's lap, right? It's not competition. So we need more nuance in the way that we talk about technology for accessibility. We also need to talk about the ways that new technology creates peril, right? This is, so one of the things that happens is that designers of technology, everything have unconscious bias. We all have unconscious bias. We're all working on it every day and trying to become better people, but we are not yet perfect. We do not live in we can't see unconscious bias because it's unconscious, right? And unfortunately, we embed our unconscious bias in our technological systems. When you have small and homogeneous groups of people creating technology, then the technology gets the collective unconscious bias of that group of creators. And one way we see this is in a particular case of delivery robots in California. I don't know if you've seen this particular delivery robot before.
Yeah.
Oh, you do? Oh, you all right. So you have a trial of these delivery robots here. Has anybody had a positive experience with them? Raise your hand.
I rescued one.
Yeah. All right, you rescued one. Here, you know what? Can we get a microphone? Can we hear this story? Because these robots, they often do things like fall over, right? Kind of like turtles, and they need to be rescued. Tell us about it.
It just got stuck on the curb, and it was just rocking backwards and forwards. And I just thought, you feel very, I think, protective for them. I don't know why. It feels very animal-like. Anyway, so I rescued it, put it back on its little way, and off it popped.
All right. That does kind of stink. Right? Yeah, it's an ungrateful robot. It's interesting to say it was stuck on the curb because the story that I want to tell you has to do with curb cuts. So curb cuts are the part of the curb that dips down to the street, right? If you're in a wheelchair, curb cuts are really helpful. In the US, curb cuts were mandated as part of the Americans with Disabilities Act. I do not know the legal context over here. I would be curious to hear it. Yep. It's called a drop to curb. Okay, fabulous. And was there a disability legislation that was that made it happen? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I apologize.
It's funky under the social model of disability. It should be, and we are signed up to the UN Convention of the Rights of Disabled People. Under our equality laws, the Equality Act 2010, there are some provisions that is based on a medical model of disability, which is a different kettle of fish altogether. But there are And our city and county councillors can be approached to help implement them where they lack, but it's a slow process. It's iterative.
All right. I mean, as long as it's iterating toward like putting them in all over the place, I'm for it, but okay, so dropped curves are what they are here. And what happened with this particular dropped curve is that the drop curve is really useful for people in wheelchairs, but when they put them in, they realize, oh wait, these are actually useful for everybody. Right? And so in the US, we call it the curb cut effect. Here, I guess we call it the dropped curve effect. Drop curves are useful if you are using a different kind of mobility aid. They're useful if you are wheeling a bicycle, if you are wheeling a stroller, if you are wheeling a dolly. They're enormously useful. So when you design for greater access, when you design for disability, everybody benefits. And it turns out that robots also really like to use the drop curves. So this particular robot had been programmed to wait before crossing the street. And it was waiting in the dropped curve, but somebody in a wheelchair was trying to cross the street and the robot was blocking their way. The robot was occupying the dropped curb and there was oncoming traffic, which made an enormously dangerous situation for the person in the wheelchair. And why did this happen? Well, the designers of the robot were not thinking about sharing space with human beings. They were thinking about the needs of the robot and elevating those needs above the needs of the people who were using the space. Okay. So what can we do? Maybe you're depressed now. I did promise you the book is not entirely a bummer. You ready? Number one thing you can do. You write this down. Keep on moving. Another thing we can do is we can emphasize AI reality. All of this magical thinking around artificial intelligence and imaginary futures is so working against us. So we need to emphasize what is real and what is imaginary about AI. When you think that AI is mysterious, it makes you feel like you have no power against it. When you look at AI as a system that can be understood with broad strokes, then you're more empowered. And this especially matters when we're trying to make policy regulating AI. We can also invest in public interest technology. This is a new field. If we have students in the room, public interest technology is a great place for getting a job in technology for social good. So we can build public technology in the public interest, and we can pay attention to responsible AI principles and responsible AI governance while we're building it. And the book does have a number of primarily US-based resources around this. We can look for human problems inside our technology. We can expect that the human problems will occur. If you're a technologist and you think, all right, I'm not sure what the human problems are, that's okay. You can collaborate with the social scientists and the humanists, the journalists even. We know a lot about social problems. Nobody needs to be a unicorn. Nobody needs to take this on all themselves. Collaboration is key. We can test technology for accessibility before releasing it, right? Testing for accessibility is too often something that happens after the fact. There's so many resources out there for learning more about accessibility, and we should take advantage of them. And finally, algorithmic auditing, which I mentioned before. Algorithmic auditing is the process of taking a look at your algorithms or your AI system and saying, all right, there's probably an issue. I'm going to confront it. I'm going to have these hard conversations. And these are hard. It is hard to have conversations at work about race. It is hard to have conversations at work about gender. It is hard to have conversations at work about disability. And it is even harder when you have those difficult conversations in the context of a technological system that an organization has invested thousands or hundreds or thousands or millions of dollars in procuring or building, right? Nobody wants to hear that their algorithm is racist, but unfortunately their algorithm is racist, and so we're going to have to normalize that. It is most likely racist, I should say. How do you know what to look for? Well, you can learn from journalists who are on the algorithmic accountability beat. I mentioned the markup, look at ProPublica, look at ICIJ. And because I'm a professor, I gotta give you a reading list, right? Here's a syllabus for learning more about disability, public interest technology, facial recognition. And in fact, the reading list is so long that I need 2 slides. Everybody take anybody else take a picture of it? Because I'm gonna go to the next slide. Ready? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Next slide. Take a picture of this one too. Great readings. I mentioned Ruha Benjamin's Race After Technology. You probably know about Safiya Noble's Algorithms of Oppression. And another fantastic Cambridge connected book is Programmed Inequality by Mar Hicks. And of course, Weapons of Mass Destruction by Kathy O'Neill is one of the books that kicked off the entire fairness, accountability, and transparency movement. And if this is not enough resources for you, there are even more resources in the back of the book. And I am delighted to be here with you tonight. And now we have time for some questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Meredith. That was great. We're going to take questions from all of you soon. So get your questions together, be thinking about that. We have 2 microphones circulating through the audience. I want to bring in the story that you tell of being told, just believe this thing, it's magic. Pretend it's magic, it works. Recursion. Just believe it, don't question it. You'll come to understand it, watch it works. And you write, I think very powerfully, magic works until it doesn't. I wonder, and kind of thinking about that, to what extent have people bought into this idea that these systems are somehow magical and we just need to trust everybody making them?
Yeah, so this story happened when I was an undergraduate. So I studied computer science at Harvard as an undergraduate, as did Mark Zuckerberg. He took exactly the same class from the same professor. And what happened in this class is we were learning about recursion, which is a super cool computer science thing, but I did not understand it at the time. And I went up to the professor after the class and I said, all right, I just don't get it. Like, you do this thing and then you do this other thing and then like it stops, but like, why does it stop? Like, there's this thing called the base case, and I did not understand it. And he got frustrated talking to me about it. And he said, just pretend it's magic. Just don't stop asking me questions. He was kind of annoyed with me, I could tell. And I felt really insulted. But because I'm a rule follower, I did what he said. I just did the thing. I just used I just wrote the recursive code and it did work. And I was like, all right, well, I'll figure this out eventually. And eventually I did. I had a kind of more intuitive understanding of it, but it was not a kind thing to say. And it occurred to me that this kind of poor pedagogy is pretty typical of that generation of elite computer science education. And that is the kind of pedagogy that the elite computer scientists are being trained in. They're then going to Silicon Valley. They are then going to these big tech firms and telling, the other people in their organization, oh, just trust me, it just works. Don't ask too many questions because, I'm smarter than you. I'm in a position of power, and that's not sufficient anymore because these algorithmic systems are harming people. And often people use they kind of boundary police technology. They make it so that other people are intimidated by the technology. And so they won't ask too many questions. And so you can make enormous profits that way, but I don't think it's getting us toward a better world.
That brings us to literally today's headlines. Everybody wants to talk now about generative AI, ChatGPT, and the other tools that are available. We're having to wade through an enormous amount of hype and magic. What's one thing you wish could cut through that messaging?
Ooh, just one thing.
Just one thing, because
I have like a dozen.
I know, but we've got so many people who have questions that we've got one thing.
All right, I really want people to understand that generative AI systems are not the reinvention of fire. Right? It is not going to change everything. It is going to change a couple of things a little bit, but we are not at the dawn of a new era. It's just some new technology. You hear a lot of hype about generative AI. We're definitely at a specific point in the hype cycle right now. But something like ChatGPT is basically a souped up version of the autocomplete that you were already using in your Gmail. And if you remember a couple of years ago when autocomplete came out, people were like, oh my God, this is going to make writing so much easier. And, it really has not set the world on fire. So that's what's going on with generative AI.
There's a phrase that's had to be blocked on autocomplete in email because it's very common. I love telling this story. It's very common, but used in the wrong context is disastrous. Can you guess what it is?
I desperately want to hear this now.
Yes. What is Sheila knows?
I love you.
I love you. Let it be known, Sheila knew. Yes.
Yeah.
I love you.
I love you. The thing we say, some of us, I learned, not in every language, but we say in English quite commonly when we're signing affectionately to friends and family, we might sign off love so-and-so, but put in the wrong business context. We can't do that. So it's so common in the email corpus language that engineers have had to specifically remove that phrase.
Wow.
Right? So we've taken the love out, literally.
Where is the love?
Where is the
It's
love?
not in the autocomplete.
It's in the black box. The love is in the black box. With that, we have time for questions.
Hello, that was so incredible and so enlightening. Thank you so much. My question is connected to how we should remove AI from policing. And that got me thinking about technology within marginalized communities. And if we're removing it from policing and to then try to come up with a more social solution that has to do with education, access to resources, how can technology exit the policing area and enter into that educational / community building area?
That's a great question. One of the ways I think that, okay, so I think there is an individual answer, there is a collective answer, and there is a policy answer. I think that the policy answer is actually tied up in kind of larger geopolitical stuff, because the EU is ahead of absolutely everybody else in implementing AI regulation. And one of the concepts that's in the proposed EU regulation around artificial intelligence is the idea that AI will be classified into high risk and low risk uses. So something like facial recognition used to unlock your phone, it would be low risk, right? Facial recognition on my phone doesn't work half the time anyway, but it doesn't really matter because there's a passcode, it's not a big deal. But facial recognition used by police on real-time video feeds would be a high-risk use because there would be a great risk of people, especially with darker skin, being misidentified, being caught up in surveillance dragnets unnecessarily. So that would be a high-risk use, and that would be registered, monitored, regulated, right? So that is an example of a policy proposal that I think could potentially work really well. Collectively, I think we need to examine our faith in technological solutions. We need to admit that police are no better and no worse than anybody else at using technology. Most of us are pretty bad at using technology, honestly. And so the idea that we would give these incredibly sophisticated systems to police and kind of expect them to use them really well is not a smart thing to do. And then on the individual level, we need to to just examine our beliefs around technology, invest in advocating for policy solutions, because it's not just about individual people avoiding surveillance. I mean, there are things you can do to avoid surveillance, like you could wear complicated makeup, or I think there's fashion now, anti-surveillance fashion, which, I mean, I'm very excited about the potential for anti-surveillance fashion, but it's maybe not practical because, sometimes you need to just like wear your uniform and go to work. So I think that there are a lot of options, and it starts with examining the unquestioning faith we have in AI. I have a question on this side.
Thank you, Meredith. Do you have any fair examples of existing AI systems, just to lift our moods a bit?
Do I have any examples of AI working well?
Yeah.
No.
Thanks.
Okay, I do have an example of algorithmic auditing working well to uncover problems in AI systems. So there are a couple of examples of effective AI audits. Kathy O'Neill, who wrote Weapons of Mass Destruction, has a consulting company called Orca. They are one of the few organizations doing algorithmic audits. And so you can hire Orca to do a bespoke audit on your algorithm to help figure out what are the ways that it might be problematic, what are the ways that it might be violating the law. And so if people are interested in making algorithms incrementally better, I would recommend checking out algorithmic auditing and also checking out mathematical methods for uncovering bias. And then once you uncover the bias, then sometimes you can use mathematical methods to remediate it. Sometimes it's simply not possible, and then you need to just do something else.
Is that working? Yeah. The content that's been, I'm not a techie, and I'm asking it as a disabled journalist. So, the content that's been scraped from the internet, copying images, that is used to train AI is largely uncurated. So it includes biases, misinformation, and a lack of authentic diversity. AI trained on this content will embed and perpetuate these biases. And over time, this lack of diversity is reinforced. And what needs to be done at this point to ensure diversity is considered when training AI?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked this, because I am super interested in what people think is the training data for things like ChatGPT and what is actually in the training data for things like ChatGPT. So there was this amazing investigation by the Washington Post about 2 weeks ago, where they looked at what's called C4, the clean crawled something corpus. What's the other C? Oh yeah, it's at any rate, there's this data set called the Common Crawl. And it has been assembled over years by making these things called web crawlers, which go all over the web and scrape data and just deposit it into this data set. And the Common Crawl is a collection of just grab scraped from the internet. It includes things like the entire corpus of 4chan. It includes things like, white supremacist hate sites, and the subset of the Common Crawl that the Washington Post examined is something called the clean Common Crawl corpus. And when I say clean in terms of data, what does that suggest to you? What do you think when I say clean data?
Ready to be analyzed.
Yeah, it's ready to be analyzed. It doesn't actually mean data that has been purged of bad words, right? A lot of people think that clean data means, oh, they've taken out all the curse words. Like that's, it's clean data that's been purged of, pornography. No, it's just tidy. Like it's just structured. It's just ready to be ingested, right? So there are all these differences in how computer scientists use language and how regular people use language, and it leads to a lot of misunderstandings. And it's part of kind of what people misunderstand about these data sets in general. But no, like the only way to make, nobody is making generative AI systems that are based on curated data sets. They're just grabbing everything they can.
We have a question in the balcony.
Thanks so much. My name is Shane from an organisation called Glitch. So this topic is super interesting to me. Going back to the topic of the appropriate use of AI, at Glitch, we unapologetically focus on Black women's experience of online abuse. And so content moderation is not up to par when it comes to their own. Yes, by protest. It's not up to par when it comes to their own terms and conditions, let alone gender, let alone race. We have this misogynoir report coming out to look at how AI and content moderation in its design is perpetuating misogynoir. One of our recommendations is we want to be able to make this better. Are we actually creating a fallacy? It's not actually able to, we're not actually able to make it better. We need to think of a more radical solution to content moderation so that platform stays safe for Black women.
I think that one of the things we need to do, so first of all, I'm so excited to hear about your organization. I love the synchronicity of you being Glitch and me having a book about glitches. And I want to learn more about your organization. I think that that undermining the patriarchy is really something that is necessary in order to have better content moderation. Without doing that, like I'm not sure what kinds of technological fixes we can put in place. It is theoretically possible to put in better content moderation. It is a matter of will and funding. Can I talk about porn?
Please
Is that
talk
an
about,
acceptable thing to talk about?
please talk
in
about
this-
porn,
In
yes.
these August halls?
Maybe not in graphic detail.
Okay.
no pun intended.
Well, one of the reasons that we don't have porn filters on, on browsers or in dating apps is because the people who are making the apps don't want them. Right, like that has been a deliberate choice by the developers. And then it gets backed up with this legal maneuvering. Where people say, oh yeah, well, if we moderated porn, then we'd have to moderate everything, but honestly, like we're moderating everything anyway. So it doesn't really hold much water. It's really just a matter of choice.
We probably have time for one. I'm just told we have time for one more question. Let's go here. We'll take two. Quickly, let's
talk fast.
let's collate the questions. So we'll get this question and then we'll get your question.
Hi, this is not directly related to race, but since we're talking about like the ethical and unbiased use of AI and the possibilities for it, like you talked about how like data sets are like the source of all these biases in AI. How can we actually like look for more ethical sources of data that are more diverse in general? Because there are a lot of arguments about how, for example, art AIs, generative AIs actually taking data with completely no consent from the artist and is harming a lot of creatives online. Like, what do you say about that? How do you think we can actually make good data sourcing also ethical as data sourcing AI?
And we'll take the last question.
And my point was just that saying Mid-Journey is highly moderated in terms of pornography. And there's specific words that are not included in there. But I was just saying down to prompting in generative AI for Mid-Journey, it's all down to the user to make sure that their images are inclusive. And as a tutor at Cambridge, I wanted to get some images about just time management, and I wanted to make myself a generative image. If I use Cambridge University as a prompt, I won't get any women or Black ethnic minorities. So it's up to me to change the visual weight of my images and get them in there. So use the technology, the amazing qualities of it, and it's up to us as individuals to understand how to use those techniques.
Inequality and better images. Want to comment on this?
Yeah, it is possible to make more inclusive data sets. It is possible to use the technologies to make your outputs more inclusive. I think one of the things that we need to do is we need to demand that the input data is more diverse, and we need to demand that the output is more diverse, and we need to just center diversity in our conversations around technology.
And on that cheery note, I want to thank all of you for being here. And Meredith, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. This was a great event.